Hey, DC foodies! Tired of guessing where to eat next? Meet Tasty, the app that helps you find the best dishes worth ordering using real receipt data instead of star ratings. See where people actually spend their money, what they order, and what it costs before you go. Whether you're looking for date night, lunch, or pizza nearby, Tasty helps you decide. Download Tasty at jointasty.com and scan your first receipt. That's Tasty with an I.
Today on CityCast DC, we're talking about a Sunoco station on U Street and what it says about actually getting things built in DC. We're going to talk about the fate of the park that was supposed to be DC's version of the High Line. And we're going to talk about a lawsuit against a think tank and what it means for a DC industry. Plus, in a members-only fourth segment, we are going to talk about our very hometown DC way of mourning Dolly Parton. I'm here with my CityCast colleague, Jackie Pizer, and with Kristen Capps from Bloomberg. Before we get to today's show, we are doing a little summer cleaning, and it turns out we have some brand new, never-been-claimed thank you gifts for our new CityCast DC neighbors. It's our Neighbors Make DC tote bag. It's a real sturdy canvas bag, so you can carry all those in-season tomatoes and eggplants home from the DuPont Farmers Market. For $10 a month or $100 a year, you can become a member and get this great way to wear your DC pride around town. Go to membership.citycast.fm/DC to join and snag your limited edition tote bag now. When you become a member, you're supporting everything this local newsroom does. That's membership.citycast.fm/DC. Thank you. Today is Friday, August 28th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC's talking about. Hey, Kristen, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Hey, Jackie.
Hello.
So I wrote a top of the CityCast newsletter about this week. It's something that is sort of in your wheelhouse as our real estate and development reporter. It's something that Kristen writes about a lot as a person who writes about the shape and look of cities. But the Business Journal had a scoop on the Sunoco gas station that's at 15th and U. You might recognize it. It's surrounded by like a pretty huge asphalt lot. It's weird because it looks like you're in the suburbs, and it's a very strange use of space in like a part of DC where I can't even imagine what the per square foot land use is. I just you can get a lot more money out of that space by doing something else. And sure enough, it had been for sale, and the owner wanted to do something else, specifically build housing, which everyone in DC politics says they want. And that didn't happen. They sold this month to another gas station operator. What struck me was usually this is where we get into a story about, DC has all these regulations and that somebody sued and there was like a NIMBY reason. But actually it was like dollars and cents, which is something that both of you guys have covered.
Yeah, it feels like kind of the epitome of the issue that developers have been complaining about ever since I started this beat. It's just like this one little corner at U and 15th is just representative of everything that they've been complaining to me about.
Which is what?
So many things. I mean, Kristen, chime in too, but on, baseline, one thing that they tell me is that it feels like the city doesn't want us to build here. They feel like there are so many roadblocks in their way, whether it's permitting and zoning and all of this labyrinth of red tape that they have to go through, that if you don't have an expediter that's helping you get through all of this stuff, that is just like such a hassle. But then I think the root of the issue, though, is that there's no capital coming into the city. They cannot raise money from investors.
So this red tape of which they complain, which is not illegitimate, has always been there. In fact, I think you can make an argument it's gotten a lot less. They have gotten better at this. But what has changed is here in 2026, in the wake of Doge, with interest rates where they are, it's just hard to get the dough if you want to, make this huge investment, this risky investment, putting up a big building and hoping that someday people want to come live in it. Even in this like undeniably buzzy and desirable neighborhood, it's hard to get the scratch to build it, which we just came through a mayoral election where everyone was talking about how do we build more houses, and I want to build 72,000, I want to build 12,000, whatever it was. But they were all assuming that the only impediment to that is red tape. And in fact, like the oldest problem in the book, like getting a bank to give you some money, seems to suddenly be the driving problem.
Yeah, I mean, so many of them have literally fled the city. Like, it's really, really hard for them to convince them to invest in these buildings because also for them, there's like no guarantee that they're going to get a return on their investment. And there's just so many, it's just been like this like perfect storm of things that have happened. The Doge layoffs really spooked them because, government was our industry here. Those were reliable jobs. People, we had a steady stream of employment that was happening. That was gone. And DC kind of rested on our laurels of the government as our industry. There is crime, or at least a perception of crime that, that these developers don't want. I mean, for one person told me that developers want two things. They want speed and they want certainty. And they also, and then I guess the third was also they want to see cities that are tough on crime and pro-business. And right now, DC is not giving that impression at all. And it's going to be even more interesting coming into this new administration, Merrill, with the new mayor coming in to see what kind of impression she's going to put on and if investors are going to turn or not. But yeah, I mean, Kristen, what do you think? Are there other reasons that I'm missing here? I mean, there's a whole list of them I've been told, but what am I missing?
I mean, you're really nailing it. I think the thing that a lot of investors are concerned about is just like the nature of like rental economics has changed in DC in a way that hasn't changed in other cities. We're dealing with like the highest delinquency rate in the nation. And I mean, if tenants are in a situation where they're unable to pay rent or where they're not paying rent, that is the bottom line. You can chip away at these things. And, Mike mentioned it at the top about, different regulatory issues. And sure, there are ways you can get to savings. You can make that 15th and U building pencil out by doing things like getting rid of requirements that there be like a retail shell on the bottom floor, the first floor. Retail's not in a great, healthy place in the city. Maybe we shouldn't have these requirements about retail parking minimums, things like that. You can chip away at it through regulations. You can chip away at it on the tax side. But just fundamentally, if tenants are not necessarily, going to be paying rent and you're dealing with maybe, a certain share, a certain percentage of the units that you can predict in the future are not going to be payable, then investors are going to look at that and say, no, absolutely not.
I mean, this is the thing about investment. It's that the dollar could be spent building a house, or it could be spent in investing in like an app from a company in China.
Or in another city. Like a lot of them are literally going to other cities. Like someone
just
told
go across the river.
Yeah. I mean, even like someone told me that someone who invested in a lot of buildings in DC, like just like moved to Raleigh because it was building up so much, and just like literally moved their business there because it's so much easier to build and more reliable.
I've seen a lot of reporting this year about people who build housing in DC and their sort of dread of doing work in DC. And it seems to me like there was sort of two basic thrusts there. One is just the economy, stupid. There's that's particularly for the non-subsidized housing that, we want to build a thing that we're going to rent for X amount of money. And suddenly the number of people who can pay X amount of money might be a lot less. But then the other is this is probably not applicable to 15th and U, but is on the so-called affordable housing side, housing that is in some way subsidized for people who can't pay the market rate. And that in those cases, they're worried people won't pay anything at all. And that the DC's system allows them to get away with it for much longer than in other places. And like whatever the social justice import of that system, what it means to someone who's thinking about building is they're thinking, I may be in a situation where I have these bank loans to pay off and I ain't got no money coming in.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually the top of people's list of what they tell me is just how hard it is to evict people. And a big issue of that is the backlog in the court system. We just haven't had enough judges. And, apparently that is going to be fixed. But the system for that also really changed during the pandemic. Before, what one person told me that, they used to literally go to the courthouse, the lawyers on both sides, and they could stand outside the courtroom and they could come to a deal, and then it wouldn't even need to go to court, and they would settle and it'd be done. And a lot of cases were fixed like that before they even went to the court. And then when it became remote and on, over Zoom, and people weren't actually talking to each other, that was just like a fascinating little nugget to me, that like that even added to the problem. I mean, and then on top of that, there's also like TOPA. Like we have this law that allows tenants to, try and buy a building if the owner is trying to sell. And a lot of these big owners, if they want to flip the building and they need capital, that will slow that down a long time. And they don't like the idea of that. They're like, why would I want to build a building here if, I could go across the river and I'm not going to have to deal with that? So it's just all kind of stacked against them wanting to do it. And, even the affordable housing advocates want tougher rules on eviction, because this affects the buildings that they are working with, right? Like they want to have units where people who need affordable housing can actually use them and take advantage of it. But there are bad actors that take advantage, and they know the laws, and they will, squat in these apartments for 18 months. And then the people down the hall see that their neighbors aren't paying rent, and they're like, am I a chump? Maybe I shouldn't be paying rent, So it's just creates this environment that's not good for these housing properties.
Kristen, let me put you on the spot, because you cover cities and urbanism nationally. Are there places that have done, if you think of what the problems are for DC, at least according to the people who are supposed to be making money building housing here, they can't do anything about, or DC, the city, can't do anything about federal layoffs. But are there places with the other stuff, with evicting people who don't pay, enabling people who want to build housing, whether it's affordable or market rate, to be able to feel much more certainty that they're going to make their money back? Are there stuff that other cities have done while also preserving a sort of sense of justice and decency that I think a lot of people in the DC Council, when they passed these laws, were going for?
Yeah, there are a few examples. I mean, a lot of cities that were, kind of forced by the circumstances of the pandemic to issue these temporary protections or even just stop court went back to doing that. I mean, Houston has not, gone woke because of the pandemic. They have turned back to a system of facilitating fast and easy evictions. So a lot of cities have just gone back to that old way of doing things. Philadelphia is an interesting case. They built one of the first court mediator programs that requires tenants and landlords to meet in that fashion that Jackie described. It's no longer an informal mechanism in Philadelphia, but it's a formal thing. And instead of, going into the court, going through these hearings, they're meeting outside. They're saying, can we make this a deal? You've got a third-party mediator. And it moves eviction cases out of the courts really quickly. In DC, there are just so many special circumstances. Like Jackie mentioned, our judges are federally appointed, and presidents just don't want to waste a lot of time appointing judges in Washington, D.C. They want to appoint federal benches. They just don't get around to doing it. But, another thing that is really unique about this city is that we have the best public defenders in the world. You're talking about, top tier white shoe lawyers who are taking a flyer on these tenants. They're basically doing a lot of pro bono work in DC's eviction courts. So you've got Harvard Trade, Steptoe and Johnson advocates for you in court in a system that's, otherwise beleaguered. And they know how to delay the system. They know how to get tenants out of a jam. And that's just not the way other cities work.
There's a strange, to me at least, contradiction here, where we've, again, just come through this mayoral race where every single person was saying the most important thing is making housing more affordable. And the way you do that is by building a lot more of it. So everyone who wants to live here can live here and can afford to live here. And then, these things that you guys are laying out, which, when you strip away the drama, are basically, here are some things that constrict the amount of housing we got. And the degree of alarm around those things seems much less than around the sort of aggregate.
In DC, something is changing. From 2023 to 2024, fatal opioid overdoses dropped by 33%. That's not a statistic. That's somebody's auntie, sister, father, neighbor, friend who is still here. Now, behind that number is a city that decided to fight back. And the DC Department of Behavioral Health is at the center of it, connecting people to prevention, treatment, and recovery services every single day. So whether you're trying to protect someone you love, find a way through your own battle, or simply understand what your community is going through, Know Your Path DC is here for you. Know your worth, know your alternatives, know your value, know yourself. Take it from me when I tell you recovery is possible. It happens every day in this city for real people. Learn more and find resources at knowyourpathdc.com.
I want to talk about another thing that didn't get built. This is we don't usually focus on things that don't exist to quite this much extent. But Jackie, you wrote a piece this week about the 11th Street Bridge Park, which, I remember, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when this was announced, it was going to be like the High Line in New York and redefine these neighborhoods. And then what?
I mean, I'm going to reveal myself here, but I've lived in DC for 6 years. I moved here in July 2020. So in my defense, it was mid-pandemic. I was working on a night shift, so I was kind of a zombie, but I had no idea that this was happening.
Well, neither did anyone else.
And I was like, oh my God, this is really cool. I lived in New York. The High Line is great. I'm like, yeah, hell yeah, let's get that in DC. But yeah, when I spoke to the folks that have been involved in this and they were like, this was pitched in 2011, I was like, my eyes bulged out of my head.
Let's back up.
Yeah.
Kristen, why don't you say, what is the thing?
So this is a plan to build a bridge on top of the old struts in the Anacostia River that used to hold a bridge, and a bridge that serves as a park, not a bridge where you drive over, but like a bridge that is a pedestrianized park. This is a design by the Dutch architecture firm OMA, and it was proposed by this developer, not a developer, I mean, he's just a guy who wants to build this park, named Scott Kratz. He, came up with this plan, and I want to say 2011. I think that is maybe when I first wrote about this. It's an awfully long time ago. And, he wanted to not just build this park, which is, really dynamic looking. It's kind of shaped like an X. He wanted to make sure this park did not do the things that are sometimes associated with new hot culture amenities like the High Line. But yeah, the idea is that this is, a bridge that connects a wealthier neighborhood with a less affluent neighborhood. In fact, the wealthier neighborhood has only gotten wealthier in the intervening years from when this was first proposed. And it managed to connect them without displacing residents on the less wealthy side in Anacostia.
Jackie, you wrote that this week they finally are about to name a contractor.
They're about to put out a bid for a contractor.
Right, i.e. the person who would put a shovel into the ground.
Yes.
What's taken them so long? I mean, so I will say in the meantime, because, as Kristen said, it's proposed in 2011, right? Obama was president. God was in the sky. DC was on the up and up. And in the meantime, huge amounts of stuff has happened right along that river, on the west side of the river, which had been considered, it was sort of an industrial area of town. And now as these buzzy neighborhoods and the Navy Yard has continued to sprout new stuff. All this stuff happens, but this public amenity that's supposed to be transformational doesn't. So what was going on?
Yeah. I mean, Charles Allen put it really interestingly when I spoke to him. He said, when there's buy-in from like an incentive from the mayor's office, things move a lot quicker. And I think we kind of have seen that with RFK. We saw it with Frederick Douglass Memorial Bridge. Now, I can't say for sure that there wasn't buy-in from them, but it took them a really long time. I mean, he told me that they had to get about 30 permits and like zoning, dealing with 30 permits for over half a dozen government and like federal and city agencies. There was a lot of issues with land transfer where, I think he mentioned that like the area where the bridge park would end was federal land. It was National Park Service. They needed to transfer it over to the city. And then, they spent 3 years negotiating a contract for the nonprofit that's running the bridge, building bridges across the river, to basically be the tenant of this bridge.
So why does that take 3 years? I mean, was everybody busy? What was going on?
That's a great question, Mike. I don't know. And you know what? I bet they couldn't really tell you either why. But it was funny because Scott told me, he was like, I felt like I was a child of divorce between these different government agencies. He was like, it sounds like what you're saying is this, and I'm hearing this. And, it's a lot of negotiating between them. And just like, he's remarkably like positive about it all. I mean, maybe he was because he was talking to a reporter. But I mean, this took a lot of patience. But I think one thing that you said, Mike, about, they're very aware that they don't want this displacement, right? And so what they tried to do during these 15 years of delays was to, get ahead of the problem, and they tried to use that time wisely. So
I hope they're really far ahead of it because, like China's built railways across the country in the meantime.
I mean, if you're thinking I guess I'm an optimist in a way, but I think what they were, trying to do was like, okay, well, we have all this, we're waiting. We may as well use this time in a good way. And I think, they have a whole arm of this nonprofit that's really focused on these programmings for, people in the community in Ward 8, addressing a lot of the issues that will likely arise from this. And then also issues that they've been facing. So everything from job training, like arts and culture events, small business grants, and I think the most importantly, like they established a land trust and are coming up with certain ways to help residents prepare them for when this bridge comes. That hopefully they won't get displaced. Which is an optimistic way of looking at it for them. We know jury's out. We'll see what happens, but they're doing their best, is what they're saying.
I mean, it's a really cool park, right? There's going to be a hammock area. There's all kinds of cool stuff in there. Kristen, can you put this again in like the context of the stuff you cover that like, and I know you've written about this specifically, but also like, this seems to me like a terrifyingly long time and a really frustrating, like, this is why we can't have nice things sort of feeling. Am I wrong about that? Or is this par for the course in big cities in America?
It's so long. 2011 was like the beginning of the Washington Nationals upswing. The beginning of the years where we got to the World Series. The World Series was a long time ago. The Highline effect that I think that has really like preoccupied Scott Kratz has like come and gone. I mean, we're looking at, a very strongly like a 2000s era project maybe being built in the 2030s. It's unusually long, and it does show that the federal government takes a long time to get around to things in Washington, D.C. There's so many, common sense.
Not some things.
We got the fountain working after a decade, so there you go.
We're going to build an arch.
We may need this park, depending on the state of the National Mall, by the time it gets around to being built. I mean, I can't think of another project that isn't like rail infrastructure that has taken quite this long. And it's a testament to the tenacity of Scott Kratz that, he's really kind of stuck to it against all odds. And it'll be almost like a monument to red tape by the time it is eventually erected.
Is it like at the end of the day, and I'm going to ask you to very dumb this down in ways that'll drive you nuts. like I've heard sort of two things. One is that there was a great concern about the park's negative effects. This beautiful park will have negative effects, which are speeding up displacement. And then the other is a sort of the weird land use stuff between a local government and a federal government and different agencies. Which of those is to blame for the delays?
I think Jackie had it right. It's definitely the land issues. It's definitely the federal entitlement issues, getting that land transfer, doing all the things, getting all those agencies to just get on the same page and pay attention to it. I promise to call Scott after this episode airs, but like I think that his bet is very cynical. I think it reflects a kind of austerity mindset that like we can't build great amenities in poor areas because it will transform them or it will ruin them or will harm people who live there. That has been the way that we built all of our great amenities and parks in the United States. And I don't think it's up to the parks and the amenities to solve those problems. I definitely agree that those problems exist. I just don't think it should be the park that's trying to solve those issues.
I mean, I hear what you're saying there. But I do think there is a history of disenfranchisement in Ward 8. And they needed buy-in from the community. And I mean, one woman that I spoke to who worked for Marion Barry at the time said that, you know, when Scott came to them, she said, we will only support you if you commit to being like working with the community and not leaving us when this is over. And I mean, I understand it's definitely like an altruistic way of looking at it, right? But at the same time, like, why wouldn't they consider that community that is, you know, very vocal about feeling like they're left behind?
And there's another way of looking at it, which is the people in that community saying, and have been, why do we always get the crappy stuff? We want good stuff. We deserve good stuff just as much as any other taxpayer.
Yeah, and they've been very purposeful also on the design. Like, a lot of the major attractions are further east. So like they have an education center. I believe the Hammock Grove that you mentioned, Mike, is also on that side. There's a whole grassy area. There's two lookouts. One's looking, you know, west or towards the, you know, the Capitol, and one's looking over Anacostia. And then on the other side, like on the Anacostia side, there's an amphitheater. There's a lush greenery. I mean, it's already really beautifully in green right now, but they're going to, you know, landscape it. And there's going to be a canoe and a kayak launch there. So, and they're also creating a lot more easier of a pathway up to where a lot of the businesses are in the neighborhood. So I think that there, you know, one woman said to me, she was like, you know, it feels like people think we're the wild, wild west over here. And hopefully this would, you know, welcome people into our community, you know, come over across the river.
But even that's a contradiction, because like half the time I'm hearing like, no, we don't want people coming over here because they're gonna drive up prices, which is a very legitimate worry too.
100%. Yeah.
So I don't know. It's like, these are the things I guess any city, and particularly this one, has to navigate to do nice things.
It's an impossible issue, and thank God we don't have to try and solve it.
All right, I want to talk quickly about one thing I've been obsessed with this week. It's, you know, there was a story, the New York Times first reported it last Friday, that the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, wants to sue, or has threatened to sue, the Center for American Progress, a big DC think tank, for $5 billion for allegedly wrongly saying that the National Guard hasn't reduced crime in the cities where he's deployed it. This is treated like what it is, which is a big national news story about like free speech and free inquiry and presidential bullying and so on. All true. But it sort of led me down a rabbit hole about think tanks in general in DC, which is, whatever you have to say about policy and policy papers, it's a big industry. Like, many of your neighbors are engaged in this industry. There's 400 think tanks roughly in DC. Some of them have a few dozen people or less. Some of them have like 800 or 900. I've not been able to find a reliable number on the total number of our neighbors who work in this field, but I think it's like thousands and thousands.
I'm sure there's a think tank that's doing that.
I'm sure there is. I just didn't do my research. But it's just to say that, like, this is one of those places where it was like, oh, like if we're in a moment where like these places can be menaced, and this, and I think in general, we've moved to a place where like the white paper that some think tank produces has less impact than before because we have a politics that is much less concerned with wonky policy. That like, actually for us locals in DC, it's an economic story. It's a jobs story too, in a weird way. And, I just know that a lot of us who do local media, we kind of like disdain these stories about big national think tanks that don't typically produce stuff about municipal issues. But like, I think we have to think of them in a different category. It's like if we were in Detroit, this is like a company that produces chassis or something.
These are our widgets.
These are our widgets.
What you wrote in the newsletter, Mike, was really interesting. I hadn't really thought about that is one of like the major industries here, especially as someone who covering like business here. I'm like, oh, right, there are a lot of think tanks. But also I am not surprised by the Trump administration going after them.
No.
Like nothing it's just.
I'll be surprised if it goes to court because it's like ridiculous. But I just like, you meet people in DC who are like, oh, I work at the Center for blah, blah, blah. And, we're coming out with a new report about like gas pipeline policy in Eastern Europe. And you kind of roll your eyes. But like now it's like, oh, and you're in an industry that like can be targeted for like $5 billion lawsuits by the president of the country. Like you talk to a lot of developers, right? So these are people who are thinking about like, I'm going to build a shopping center, or I'm going to build an apartment building or what have you. And I'm going to do it here. In DC, there is, obviously we know there's government jobs and lobbying jobs and stuff, but there's this whole sort of there's these other industries, probably including ours, the media, which are only at the size they are here because of the proximity to the federal government, to policymakers, and so on. And as people think about, like, is this a good place to build housing or whatever, they are thinking about the overall economic health of the thing. Have you ever heard people talking about, like, the state of the kind of non-government, but definitely Washington-centric industries?
Well, I could take a stab. I don't think anyone had ever thought of the think tank sphere as anything but just like permanent until Doge came along. And, when it wiped out whole agencies like USAID, it really undermined just a ton of think tanks that kind of follow them along like those helper fish on sharks. And they're, in the serious trouble for the economic vitality of the city that, like, one, you have vast federal agencies shedding staff, but two, that you have these kind of satellite unofficial agencies that do, frankly, a lot of the work of governing that lose their staff or their income too. And then you have the think tanks that maybe help that are also impacted. So it just like seems like a compounding effect of this Trump administration that further harms all the things we've been talking about in terms of housing and development in the city.
And I think that's the thing of more than anything else at this moment, that there's a lot of stuff that people in this city thought were permanent and have now realized are maybe like not so permanent. And I'm sure that actually is going to lead to some good, some appreciation for what we've got, or working harder to preserve what we got. But it's a pretty jarring change, which, like, if you just think of like the broader culture of our city, I think that like internalizing that change has been like the most interesting dynamic, and will continue to be. Okay, I want to give a big thank you to our newest CityCast DC neighbors. There's a lot of them this week, so bear with me. Ethan S., Mia C., Ileana N., Christy A., Pamela S., Judith S., Colbert K., Cynthia W., Joe W., Mary Ellen M., Jill R., Margaret M., Alexander B., Anna W., Barbara M., Amy C., Douglas M., Kenley R., Jennifer N., and Juliana V. Thank you all for your support. Today, all of these new subscribers and every other member gets a bonus 4th roundup chat. We're going to talk about our recently departed Earth Angel, Dolly Parton. If you want to be sure you always get the full episode, please become a member. Head to membership.citycast.fm and sign up. It's only $10 a month. Members get ad-free listening, exclusive member events, and an extra events newsletter every week. Again, that's membership.citycast.fm. Kristen, Jackie, thank you guys for being here.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
And that is all for today here on CityCast DC. Our production team this week was Alexander Turk and Matthew Rogers. You can check out all of our excellent newsletters and reporting at dc.citycast.fm. Our hosts are Bridget Todd and me, Michael Schaefer. Music is by Alex Roldan, with additional music from Philip Ayers and Blue Lou from Triple Scoop Music via Getty Images. If you enjoyed the show, why not suggest to a think tank friend that they write a white paper about us? We are a policy solution to all of your problems. We'll be back Monday morning with more news from around the city. Bye.